Your soul remembers everything. Introduction. There's a quiet voice inside you, a voice that never truly left. No matter how far you ran, how deeply you buried the past, or how loud the world screamed for you to be someone else. It's the whisper beneath the noise, the pulse beneath the chaos, the part of you that remembers everything. You may not always hear it clearly. Sometimes it speaks in fleeting moments of déjà vu, a sudden wave of emotion, or a dream that lingers long after waking. Other times it shouts through the cracks of your breaking heart or the ache in your bones when the world feels too heavy. This voice is your soul, and it has been holding your story all along. Your soul remembers everything is a journey back to that voice, that sacred space within you that knows your deepest wounds and your greatest gifts. It is an invitation to stop running from your pain and start embracing the truth that your suffering, your joy, your shadows, and your light are all part of a divine memory encoded into your being. This book isn't about quick fixes or empty motivation. It's about deep remembering, the kind that shakes you awake, unsettles your old beliefs, and gently pulls you toward wholeness. Through stories of real people who have faced their own darkness and emerged stronger. Through reflections that blend spiritual wisdom with psychological insight. And through challenges that ask you to lean into discomfort, you will discover how to reconnect with the essence of who you are. The soul's memory is not a burden, it's a beacon. It holds the power to heal old wounds, dissolve limiting beliefs, and open the door to a life lived fully and freely. Whether you're at the beginning of your healing journey or standing at a crossroads longing for change, this book meets you there ready to guide you home. Because the truth is simple yet profound. Your soul has never forgotten you. And now, it's time for you to remember it. Chapter 1. The moment that breaks you. It doesn't come with a warning. The moment your soul decides to speak louder than your survival instinct. For Kayla, it happened in a grocery store aisle, holding a box of cereal, suddenly unable to remember why she was there. Not because of forgetfulness, but because the weight of pretending had finally collapsed. She stood frozen, hands trembling, tears welling up, not from the cereal, but from the realization that she hadn't been living, just functioning. For years, she had worn a smile that didn't belong to her, made decisions to keep others comfortable, and swallowed her truth like medicine that never cured anything. And in that sterile fluorescent light, surrounded by canned goods and quiet strangers, her soul finally cracked open. Because that's how the soul works. It doesn't raise its voice until everything else has failed. The moment that breaks you isn't the end. It's the sound of something ancient inside you waking up. Your soul doesn't speak in words, it speaks in interruptions and breakdowns and tears that have no name. It remembers who you were before you buried yourself to become acceptable. It remembers the girl who danced in the mirror, the boy who believed he could fly, the wonder, the bravery, the unedited aliveness of you. But life teaches forgetting. It trains you in approval, comparison, suppression, until one day, your soul starts shaking the cage you built around it. The moment that breaks you isn't a failure. It's the first step back home. Your soul remembers what your mind has tried to forget, that you were never meant to live in a performance. You were meant to live in truth. And sometimes, truth comes wrapped in silence, confusion, even suffering, not as punishment, but as a signal. Because breakdowns are spiritual interventions. They are sacred ruptures. The soul lets you run on autopilot until it no longer can. When you find yourself crying without a reason, zoning out in the middle of a meeting, hating the life you once prayed for, it's not drama, laziness, or weakness. It's your soul trying to make you remember. Remember what? That you were not born to betray yourself. That there is a deeper current pulling you towards something honest, something raw, something free. That the pain you feel is a message encoded in emotion, asking you to stop, listen, and return. Return to your body. Return to your boundaries. Return to the part of you that was never broken, only buried. This is where transformation begins, not with fixing, not with striving, but with remembering. And remembering hurts because it asks you to face everything you denied for the sake of peace. But here's the paradox. The moment you allow yourself to be shattered by truth is the moment you begin to heal. You don't become powerful by staying strong. You become powerful by surrendering to what is real. The soul doesn't need you to have answers. It just needs you to get quiet enough to hear the question. And here it is. What part of yourself have you abandoned in order to be loved? Sit with that. Let it break you if it must. Let it take you back. Because that question isn't the end. It's the invitation. The truth is, your soul has been whispering all along. Through insomnia, through burnout, through the ache that never leaves, through the dreams you keep postponing, through the people who mirror your unhealed parts. And now, finally, through this moment, your moment. The moment that breaks you. Doesn't ruin your life. It rewrites it. It reroutes you toward the life that your soul actually came here to live. You are not lost, even if you feel like it. You are not behind, even if others seem ahead. You are not broken, even if you've been shattered. You are remembering. And that remembering will hurt before it heals. It will confuse before it clarifies. But it will lead you if you allow it back to yourself. The real you. The one before the trauma, before the performance, before the silence. And so the question remains, not as a demand, but as a doorway. If your soul remembers everything, what is it asking you to reclaim right now? Chapter 2. Memory Beyond the Mind. There are moments you can't explain. When you walk into a place you've never been and feel like you've already lived there. When someone's face is unfamiliar but stirs something deep and ancient. Or when a dream leaves you waking in tears with no story to attach them to. These aren't random. These are memory traces from beyond the mind. Because while your brain forgets to protect you, your soul archives everything. Every emotion, every frequency, every unspoken knowing. Think of it like this. Your brain is a hard drive, limited by time, trauma, and conditioning. Your soul is a cloud, timeless and limitless, storing truths your conscious mind was never taught to hold. That's why sometimes you feel sadness that doesn't belong to your present, joy that arrives uninvited, or resistance to something before it even happens. Your soul remembers lifetimes, patterns, wounds you never named but still carry, and wisdom you didn't learn but somehow know. Science calls it instinct. Spirituality calls it imprint. But you, if you get still enough, will recognize it as your inner knowing. The challenge is that in a world that worships logic, anything that can't be explained gets dismissed. So you start to doubt yourself. You abandon your inner compass for someone else's GPS. But truth never dies. It just gets quieter beneath all the noise. The moment you begin to trust your inner sense again, memory beyond the mind awakens. You'll notice it in how you finish people's sentences, how you feel someone's energy before they speak, how you know when something is off even when everyone says it's fine. These aren't coincidences. They are echoes of remembrance. Your soul is fluent in energy, not language. It doesn't need words to validate truth. It simply vibrates in alignment or discomfort. And if you've been numb to your intuition, it's not because it left. It's because your mind got louder. The good news is, remembering is a choice. It starts when you listen to the part of you that already knows. Like the part that stayed in a relationship you couldn't explain but couldn't walk away from because your soul was replaying an old lesson. Or the part that knew a decision was wrong before you had evidence because your soul had seen this pattern unfold before. The more you tune in, the more you'll realize. Your body remembers what the mind forgets. Your dreams reveal what the ego hides, and your triggers illuminate what the soul still wants healed. Memory beyond the mind shows up in symbols, synchronicities, repeated experiences, and people who feel eerily familiar. The patterns aren't punishments. They're blueprints mapping you back to yourself. And when you begin to honor this deeper intelligence, life stops feeling like chaos and starts feeling like a conversation with the divine. This is the turning point. You no longer live only from what you've been taught. You start living from what your soul already knows. And that shift from mental logic to soul memory is what transforms survival into sacred living. You don't need to understand it all to honor it. You just need to listen. You just need to remember that the deepest parts of you were never lost, just waiting. So the real question becomes, if you trusted what your soul already knows, how different would your life look right now? Chapter 3. The wounds you didn't sign up for. There's a weight you've been carrying that didn't begin with you, and it took Jasmine 34 years to realize it. She always felt the ache before the answer, an invisible sadness in rooms that looked happy, a need to apologize even when she hadn't done anything wrong, a pattern of trusting people who drained her, and a tightness in her chest whenever she spoke too loudly, as if love could be lost in the sound of her truth. It didn't make sense on paper, no history of abuse, no obvious trauma, and yet something in her spirit always felt cracked. It wasn't until she sat with a healer in the mountains of Arizona, surrounded by silence and sage, that the words surfaced like a whisper through her bloodstream. This pain isn't yours, but it lives in you. That single sentence shattered her understanding of identity. We inherit more than eye color and last names. We inherit unspoken fears, suppressed grief, beliefs shaped by survival, and shame passed down like an heirloom no one talks about. These are the wounds we didn't sign up for, ancestral echoes carried in our nervous systems, in the way we flinch when people raise their voice, in the way we shrink ourselves in moments that demand power. Your soul, wise and infinite, knows the difference between what's truly yours and what was absorbed. But the human part of you has likely mistaken survival patterns for personality traits, and that confusion creates suffering. You were not born to be anxious. You were taught fear through energy. You were not born to be small. You adapted to other people's comfort. You were not born to betray yourself. You learned it watching others do the same. The soul remembers joy, radiance, and ease, but the body remembers chaos, rejection, and abandonment. This disconnect is where your pain lives. Not because you're broken, but because you've been coated with pain that was never witnessed, processed, or healed in generations before you. The woman who always chases love may be carrying the abandonment her grandmother never spoke of. The man who avoids confrontation at all costs may be haunted by his father's unexpressed rage. And the child who never learned to cry without guilt is still trapped inside you, wondering if being soft is dangerous. These are not just patterns, they are blueprints, emotional DNA, and unless we become conscious of them, we will repeat them. But here's the miracle. Awareness is the beginning of release. Once you name it, it stops owning you. Once you see it, you stop recycling it. The soul's work isn't to blame or shame, it's to remember and rewire. So ask yourself, whose pain am I carrying? Whose story am I still enacting? Who taught me that love must be earned, or that rest is laziness, or that I'm only worthy? When I am needed, the answers will come, not always in words, but in memories, sensations, dreams, or gut truths you've ignored. And as they rise, they don't destroy you, they liberate you. Healing inherited wounds is not betrayal of your family, it's freedom for them, too. When you heal what wasn't yours, you do what generations could not. You stop the echo. You clear the static. You become the place where the pain ends and presence begins. It won't happen overnight, and it doesn't need to. But every moment you pause before reacting, every time you choose stillness over panic, every time you soothe the inner child instead of silencing her, you are remembering a truth older than fear. You were never meant to carry what you did not create. And the moment you choose to set it down without apology or permission is the moment your soul exhales and says, "Finally, you're listening." Chapter 4. When the body speaks what the mouth cannot. There are aches inside you that have no medical explanation. Tension in your shoulders that no massage can erase. Fatigue that sleep can't seem to fix because your body has been speaking the truths your mouth was never allowed to say. For Daniel, it started as chest pain at 35. The doctors ran tests, found nothing, and told him it was anxiety, maybe stress. But the pain persisted, showing up every time he ignored what he felt, every time he said yes when he wanted to say no, every time he smiled to keep the peace while something inside him screamed. Because long before your mind can articulate what's wrong, your body already knows. It carries the weight of what's unspoken, what's been dismissed, suppressed, or silenced. It remembers every time you swallowed your emotions, every time you pushed past your breaking point, every time you chose survival over expression. The tight throat, the clenched jaw, the shallow breath, none of it is random. It's your body echoing what your soul cannot endure being hidden anymore. Trauma that the brain buries, the body carries. And it does so faithfully until one day it whispers through a symptom or a panic attack or a chronic ache. Please, listen. But we don't. We take pills to quiet the signals. We caffeinate ourselves through exhaustion. We gaslight our own pain by calling it weakness or oversensitivity. We become fluent in dismissing ourselves, thinking if there's no wound we can see, then it must be in our head. But it's not in your head, it's in your history. Your body is a living record of everything you couldn't say, didn't process, weren't allowed to feel. The migraine that comes when you're around certain people, the back pain that flares when you're overwhelmed, the stomach tightness before speaking your truth. It's all data. It's all memory. Your soul remembers, and your body reveals. And no, this doesn't mean that every illness is emotional, but it does mean that every emotion unprocessed has a place it tries to go. The body becomes the map. When the voice goes missing, it cries out in symptoms what your younger self was never safe enough to say aloud. The rage you swallowed, the heartbreak you masked, the fear you were told, toughen up, through. This is not weakness, it's intelligence. Your body is not betraying you. It's trying to free you. It's asking you to come home. But to come home, you must stop asking your body to perform while your soul is screaming. You must become fluent again in your own signals, in the sacred language of sensation. Begin to notice. When do you get tired around certain people? When do you feel yourself shrinking, tightening, losing breath? Where does your body soften, open, come alive? These aren't coincidences, they're revelations. When the body speaks what the mouth cannot, it's not drama, it's wisdom. And the healing doesn't start when you figure it out. It starts when you believe your body without needing it to prove anything. You start healing when you trust that discomfort is intelligence, not inconvenience. Because the truth is, your body has always known the difference between safety and suppression, between alignment and adaptation. And while your mind may lie to keep the peace, your body never does. It will tell you again and again what you're not meant to hold, who you're not meant to be around, what you're no longer meant to tolerate. But you must choose to listen. You must stop punishing yourself for signals you never created, and instead, begin the sacred work of responding to them with gentleness, curiosity, and love. The body is the soul's last messenger. When the heart is silent and the voice is hidden, the body knocks, not to destroy you, but to awaken you. So here's the question you must begin with, not to answer with your head, but to feel into with your body. What part of you is still carrying pain that no one else ever acknowledged? Chapter 5. The Lies You Lived. To belong. There comes a time when you realize that the version of you the world applauded was never really you at all, just a collection of strategies, masks, and muted truths sculpted to survive in places that didn't feel safe to be whole. For years, Elijah laughed at jokes that hurt, nodded at ideas that clashed with his soul, and wore clothes, opinions, and habits that fit someone else's idea of normal. He didn't think he was lying. He thought he was adapting. But the soul doesn't adapt, it waits. It waits behind the silence of every swallowed truth, behind the tension in every fake smile, behind the gut instinct you learn to ignore. Because when you're young, belonging often feels more important than authenticity. You learn quickly that honesty can cost you connection, that your realness might be too loud, too soft, too much, or not enough. So you adjust. You learn to perform. You laugh even when something inside you wants to cry. You agree just to keep the peace. You play small so no one feels threatened. You deny your own wisdom because others don't understand it. And slowly you begin to drift from yourself, not in one loud moment, but in thousands of tiny ones. Until one day you wake up and feel like a stranger in your own life. That's when the soul steps in, not to shame you, but to remind you. Because your soul never forgets the truth you tried to trade for love. It remembers who you were before fear taught you to edit your essence. The lies you lived to belong weren't failures. They were your way of surviving. But survival is not the same as living. You weren't born to fit in, you were born to return. And that return begins with radical honesty. Where did you leave yourself behind? What truths did you tuck away to be chosen? What parts of you have been starving for air, for light, for expression? The healing begins not with blame, but with compassion, because you were doing the best you could in a world that sometimes makes realness feel dangerous. But the truth is, belonging that costs you your soul isn't belonging. It's abandonment. And the longer you pretend to be someone you're not, the more exhausted you become. Not just tired in the body, but weary in the spirit. Because lying to fit in will always cost you your frequency. And you'll know it, even if you can't name it. You'll feel it in the tightness in your chest, in the moments when your smile feels plastic, in the ache that won't leave no matter how much success or approval you gather. That ache is your soul asking you to come home. It's the part of you that remembers your wildness, your softness, your clarity, your courage. It's the whisper that says, you don't have to lie anymore. You don't have to earn what you were born worthy of. You don't have to shrink so others can breathe. You don't have to be palatable to be lovable. You don't have to fit molds you were born to break. You don't have to disappear in order to be safe. And maybe, just maybe, the places where you never belonged were the evidence that your soul was too big to be boxed. You didn't fail those spaces. They failed to hold you. Now, the invitation is not to become someone new, but to remember who you were before the world convinced you to hide. The lies you lived to belong were never meant to be your forever. They were a detour, not your destination. And the return begins when you choose truth over approval, alignment over acceptance, wholeness over performance. So the question is not, who do I need to be for them? It is, who was I before I believed I had to be anyone else? Chapter 6. The Hidden Language of Your Energy. Before you speak, your energy speaks for you, and most people never learn how to listen to what it's actually saying. Maya didn't either, not until her body collapsed from years of ignoring the Signs. She had mastered every script, polite smiles, strong posture, right answers, and no matter how much she achieved, she always felt like she was dragging herself through invisible mud. Doctors found nothing wrong. Therapists gave her strategies. But her energy was screaming in a language no one taught her to understand. It wasn't burnout, it was betrayal. Not from others, but from herself, because your energy never lies. It carries memory, emotion, frequency, and it's always honest, even when your mouth is not. We live in a world that values words over vibration, performance over presence. But the soul knows. The body knows. When you're in the wrong room, it tightens. When you're living someone else's dream, it drains. When you're forcing what's no longer aligned, it shuts down. We call it exhaustion. We call it overthinking. But more often, it's misalignment. Your energy is the most honest translator between your soul and your life. And it's always communicating through heaviness, through sudden irritation, through the strange resistance that shows up before you say yes to something that doesn't feel right. The tragedy is that most people gaslight their own energy because it doesn't come with proof, only a pull. We override our knowing to stay likable, productive, accepted. We say, "I'm fine," when our field is full of grief. We walk into spaces that feel hollow and pretend to be inspired. But the body keeps score, and your frequency records everything. That's why some people feel like sunshine, and others feel like storms before they even speak. It's not imagination, vibration. And when you learn to read your own field, you stop needing permission to change your life. Maya did. She stopped chasing validation and started chasing peace. She learned to ask herself not, "What should I do?" but "What does my energy feel in this space, with this person, in this decision?" And slowly, her world changed, not because she had the perfect strategy, but because she stopped ignoring the truth that lived inside her frequency. This is the hidden language of your energy. It remembers what your mind forgets. It senses what your eyes miss. And it tells you the truth even when your voice won't. And once you learn to listen, everything begins to shift. Because alignment is not just a mindset, it's a vibration. And your soul has always been trying to return you to the frequency where you finally feel free. So ask yourself now, not from your brain, but from your body, where in your life are you pretending to feel light while carrying a weight you were never meant to hold? Chapter 7. The silent contract you didn't know you signed. You didn't sign it with a pen, but with your silence. You didn't agree to it in words, but in the way your body froze when you were hurt and no one noticed. Somewhere between the first betrayal and the 100th, you made an unconscious deal with the world. If I stay small, quiet, agreeable, maybe I won't get hurt again. That's the silent contract, the invisible vow you made to protect yourself in a world that felt unsafe. For Marcus, it started at age 9 when his father left and no one explained why. He remembered watching his mother stare blankly at dinner while he learned not to ask questions. He learned quickly that emotion made people uncomfortable, that needing reassurance made him a burden, and that being easy earned him love or something that looked like it. And so he became what many of us become, the version of himself, most likely to be accepted, even if it meant erasing who he really was. That's how the contract forms, not from weakness, but from survival. It teaches you to perform instead of feel, to conform instead of choose, to accommodate instead of ask. And over time, it turns into your personality, but your soul remembers. It remembers the night you wanted to speak but swallowed the truth. It remembers the smile you faked to keep the peace. It remembers the dreams you dismissed because they seemed too much. The soul keeps score, not in bitterness, but in longing. It whispers through resentment, anxiety, fatigue. It tries to show you the cost of that contract, your voice, your joy, your inner compass. The silent contract says, stay likable, stay quiet, stay safe. But your soul says, be whole. The real tragedy isn't that you made the contract, it's that you forgot you could break it. Most people don't even realize they're still abiding by it. They think they're being mature when they tolerate mistreatment, being strong when they suppress tears, being successful when they chase goals that never felt aligned. But none of that is strength. It's fear in disguise. Is the nervous system still obeying an old agreement? But what if you could tear it up? What if you could look at your life, your job, your relationships, your beliefs and ask, did I choose this freely, or did I choose it to stay safe? That one question could change everything, because the soul's path begins where the contract ends. The moment you choose discomfort over performance, truth over politeness, intuition over logic, you begin the sacred rebellion. And yes, it will feel terrifying at first. You might disappoint people. You might feel guilt. You might not recognize yourself for a while. But that's not failure. It's freedom. It's the unraveling of a self you were never meant to carry. And beneath that unraveling, you'll find someone familiar. The child who was loud, curious, fierce. The teen who dreamed wildly and loved recklessly. The adult you were always meant to become, bold, honest, at home in your own being. So maybe this is the chapter where you write a new contract, not with the world, but with your soul. One that says, I will no longer betray myself to belong. I will no longer shrink to make others comfortable. I will no longer pretend that silence is peace. Because the truth is, if you were conditioned into a contract, you can also consciously release it. And once you do, the world you feared will not collapse. The people who truly love you will stay. The dreams that felt too distant will draw closer. And most of all, the weight you've carried for years will begin to lift. Not all at once, but steadily, quietly, like a soul finally remembering the terms it was born to live by. Chapter 8. Who were you before the world told you? Imagine yourself as a child, sitting on the floor of your childhood home, bare feet brushing the worn carpet, eyes wide with curiosity, heart open without hesitation or doubt. Before the world poured in with its rules, judgments, and expectations, who were you really? Maybe you were the kid who sang loudly in the shower, the one who believed in magic, or the soul who spent hours imagining worlds that no one else could see. That pure essence, that unfiltered spark, was your soul's original frequency before the world taught you to mute it. Somewhere along the way, the voices came. Be quiet. Don't be too much. Stop dreaming. Act your age. These weren't just words. They were the first chains wrapped around the wildness of your spirit. The world's rules are subtle but relentless norms that push you to fit into boxes so narrow they squeeze the life out of your true self. You learn to tuck away the colors that didn't blend, the ideas that didn't make sense to others, and the dreams that seemed too big for your reality. But your soul remembers. It holds on to the innocence, the wonder, and the fearless authenticity that the world tried to erase. This remembering is not just nostalgia, it's a calling. A call to rediscover what you abandoned when survival required compliance, when love demanded silence, when safety meant hiding your light. The child inside you who danced in the rain, who spoke to stars, who laughed without restraint, she or he is still there, patiently waiting beneath layers of should and must. The question is, will you find the courage to listen? To peel back the years of conditioning and touch the part of you that was never broken, only buried? The answer lies in the small moments when you catch yourself smiling at a memory, feeling a sudden rush of creativity, or longing for something undefined yet deeply familiar. These are the echoes of your soul, gently reminding you of your truth. Who were you before the world told you who to be? The answer is not just about reclaiming childhood innocence. It's about reclaiming your birthright to authenticity, joy, and freedom. When you start peeling away the layers, you may find old wounds, fears, and shame that once held you captive. But you'll also find courage, resilience, and an ancient wisdom that never left you. The world may have tried to shape you into a version that fits its mold, but your soul's memory is bigger than any label, any role, any expectation. It's a living archive of your essence, wild, whole, and unapologetically you. This chapter invites you to step into that remembrance, not as a fleeting daydream, but as a deliberate act of reclamation. When you begin to honor the child you once were, you ignite a powerful shift that ripples through every part of your life, your relationships, your work, your dreams. Because healing starts with remembering, and remembering starts with asking, who was I before the world told me who to be? What parts of me did I silence? What parts of me am I ready to bring back to life? The journey back to yourself is not about erasing the past, but embracing it, fully holding the child and the adult together in compassionate arms. And as you do, you may realize that the world's story about you was never the whole story. Your soul remembers everything, including the truth that you are far more than the sum of other people's opinions. You are the child who laughed with abandon, the dreamer who painted skies with color, the fierce spirit who refused to be dimmed. This is your homecoming. This is your soul calling you back to the freedom you once knew. And in that return, you find not only yourself, but the power to rewrite your story from a place of love, authenticity, and unshakable truth. Chapter 9. Breaking the Cycle is your soul's rebellion. There's a moment in everyone's life when the invisible chains forged by history, family, and unspoken rules feel unbearable, as if you're trapped in a loop written long before you took your first breath. For James, it was the bitter sting of watching his father repeat the same mistakes he swore he'd never make, angry outbursts, broken promises, and silence that felt louder than words. Yet, James also felt something fierce inside him, a quiet but undeniable rebellion simmering beneath the surface, a call not just to survive the legacy of pain but to shatter it. This is the soul's rebellion, the sacred resistance to inherited suffering, to unconscious patterns that echo across generations like a haunting melody. Your soul remembers those cycles, the stories you didn't choose but inherited anyway, encoded in your DNA and etched deep in your emotional memory. Breaking the cycle is not just an act of defiance. It is a reclamation of your soul's sovereignty, a declaration that your life will not be bound by the ghosts of the past. This rebellion often begins with discomfort, the uneasy recognition that your reactions, fears, or failures aren't truly yours, but borrowed shadows passed down from ancestors who never healed. The stories told around dinner tables, the silent agreements to keep peace at the cost of authenticity, the repeating roles of victim, perpetrator, or rescuer. These are the cycles that trap souls in a kind of spiritual amnesia. But the moment you feel that deep dissatisfaction, that nagging unrest, that's your soul waking up and saying, no more. Breaking the cycle means standing in the fire of discomfort without fleeing, facing truths that hurt but liberate. It means questioning the unquestioned, challenging family narratives, cultural expectations, and your own internalized beliefs about who you are supposed to be. It means healing isn't linear, but a spiral, circling back through wounds to untangle and rewrite the script. Your soul's rebellion also invites you to rewrite what legacy means, to choose courage over conformity, love over fear, freedom over control. It demands that you cultivate radical self-awareness, so the patterns that once ruled unconsciously become conscious tools for growth. This rebellion is not always loud or visible. Often, it is quiet, daily acts of choosing differently, setting boundaries where none existed, saying no to what drains you, forgiving yourself for repeating old mistakes, and breaking silence too. Speak your truth. And here is the secret. When you break a cycle, you don't just heal yourself. You heal your ancestors and the generations yet to come. Your courage sends ripples backward and forward through time, unraveling pain that once seemed permanent. This is why breaking the cycle feels like rebellion, because it goes against everything programmed by survival to keep you small and safe in old patterns. But it's also the most loving act you can offer yourself and your lineage. The soul remembers. Freedom even when the mind forgets. It hungers for authenticity beneath the weight of tradition. Your breaking is your becoming a fierce, beautiful act of remembrance that you are not doomed by your past, but empowered by the very act of choosing otherwise. So here's the truth to hold close. Your soul's rebellion is not a curse or a burden, but the most profound invitation to rise, to reclaim your story, and to live a legacy of healing that no one else can give but you. The question now is this: what cycle will you break today, and how will your soul's rebellion rewrite your family's story forever? Chapter 10. The emotions that return without warning. Sometimes emotions return like ghosts you thought you'd buried deep beneath your skin, sneaking back without warning, flashing through a song on the radio, a sudden scent in the air, or a casual comment that feels like a match to dry tinder. For Marcus, it was a text from an old friend, simple and innocent, but it opened a floodgate of sorrow and anger he thought he'd mastered years ago. That evening, alone in his apartment, those feelings, grief over lost trust, rage over betrayals, loneliness as heavy as a stone, crashed over him like a tidal wave he couldn't swim against. And he realized that emotions aren't linear or polite. They don't check your schedule or care about your progress. They are messengers from your soul, knocking insistently on the door of your consciousness, reminding you that some wounds never fully close. They only wait patiently for you to be ready to heal them. These unexpected waves can feel like setbacks, proof that you're weak or that you haven't moved on, but in truth, they are sacred signals that parts of you are still deeply alive, still remembering what your mind tried to silence. The soul doesn't forget trauma or loss. It archives every moment in the body's memory, the energy field, the cells. When these emotions return, they are asking you to stop running, to stop pretending, and to listen. They want you to witness the forgotten parts of your story, not to be overwhelmed by them, but to integrate them. They invite you into a radical act of self-compassion and courage, to sit with discomfort without numbing or escaping, to meet pain with presence instead of resistance. Imagine your emotions as ancient letters from your soul's past, stamped with urgency and love, waiting for your attention to unlock their meaning. This chapter isn't about controlling or erasing those feelings, but about honoring their timing and purpose. Because healing doesn't erase memories. It transforms your relationship with them. When you learn to receive your emotions as returning guests rather than intruders, you create space for transformation, for grief to turn into gratitude, for anger to become action, for loneliness to open the door to self-love. The journey is not neat or predictable. Sometimes the feelings come back stronger, sometimes subtler. But every return is an opportunity to rewrite your inner narrative, to reclaim parts of your soul you thought were lost. You're invited now to stop running from those emotions that surprise you, to lean into their message. I am here. I am part of your truth. The question you must ask yourself is not, why am I broken? But, what does this feeling want me to remember? The soul remembers everything, even the parts you try to forget. And those emotions are the echoes calling you home, whispering that healing isn't a destination, but an unfolding dance between past and present, pain and love, loss and rediscovery. When you embrace this dance, you begin to live fully again, not despite your emotions, but because of them. And so, the challenge is clear. Next time those feelings arrive without warning, instead of shutting the door, open it a little wider. What if, in the return of those emotions, you find not weakness, but wisdom, not chaos, but clarity, not endings, but the beginning of a deeper remembering? Chapter 11. Sacred Grief, Sacred Growth. There's a photograph Emma keeps tucked inside an old leather journal. The faded image of her grandmother's hands resting gently on a garden gate. Wrinkled yet strong, holding a lifetime of stories, Emma never fully understood until grief knocked at her own door. When her grandmother passed, the world shifted on a tilt she hadn't expected. The grief was not just sorrow, but a deep, sacred unearthing that stripped away the safe surfaces she clung to. Grief, Emma learned, is not simply pain to endure or a wound to heal. It is a sacred invitation to grow. It is the soul's way of planting seeds in the fertile soil of loss, where the bitter taste of absence transforms into a fierce, tender resilience. Society often asks us to move on from grief quickly, to smile through the cracks, to plaster over the void with distractions. But the soul knows better. It remembers every heartbreak, every goodbye, every silent tear shed in the dark, and it honors them because they are part of our becoming. Sacred grief is the gateway through which the soul passes to deepen its roots into the earth and reach toward the light. It demands presence, being willing to feel fully without rushing to fix or numb. When you allow yourself to sit with your sorrow, without shame or hurry, you enter a sacred space where growth and grief intertwine like roots beneath the soil. In this space, pain is not a curse, but a teacher. Grief, not a prison, but a passage. This is where your soul remembers how strong you are, how much you can hold, and how deeply you can love even when the world falls away. Sacred growth doesn't erase grief. It honors it by allowing the broken places to bloom into wisdom, compassion, and fierce authenticity. Emma's journey through grief became a rebirth, a transformation where she found parts of herself she had lost to fear and busyness. In losing her grandmother, she found a fierce tenderness for life and an unshakable connection to something greater than herself. The paradox is clear. The more you open to your grief, the more room you make for growth. The more you honor your losses, the more space you create for joy, purpose, and love to take root again. Sacred grief is not a detour from your path, it is the path itself. It calls you to lean into the discomfort, to meet your shadows with courage, and to let the soul's memory guide you through the darkness toward light. It's a fierce love letter from your soul, reminding you that every ending carries the seed of a new beginning. So the question to carry is this: how can you welcome your grief as a sacred teacher and allow it to grow you into the fullest expression of yourself? Chapter 12. The Shadow Knows the Way. There was a moment when Elijah, a successful entrepreneur from Portland, realized that the greatest enemy he'd been fighting wasn't external. It was the shadow inside him, the parts he had hidden so well, even from himself. It was the anger he denied, the fears he buried, the jealousy he called irrational, and the shame he swore he would never speak of. For years, he chased light and positivity, thinking that embracing his dark parts would make him less worthy, less spiritual, less enlightened. But what Elijah didn't realize until that late night in his dimly lit office, staring at his reflection in a window that showed more than just his face, was that the shadow wasn't his adversary. It was a compass, a guide, a truth teller, rooted in his deepest wounds and unhealed memories that had been quietly steering his life all along. In hiding from the shadow, he'd been running from himself, blocking the very pathways his soul was trying to open. Because the shadow holds the keys to your greatest freedom, each suppressed emotion, every denied truth, every fragment you deem unlovable is actually a message, a map etched in darkness, inviting you to reclaim wholeness. Carl Jung famously said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." And what this means for you is that the journey to self-discovery is not about chasing endless positivity or lightness, but about leaning into discomfort and sitting with the parts of yourself you'd rather avoid: the jealousy, the rage, the deep sorrow, the feelings of unworthiness. These are not signs of failure or spiritual weakness, but invitations from your soul to show up fully, to integrate your fractured self. Because when you deny your shadow, it manifests unconsciously through projections, sabotages, addictions, and repeating painful patterns. It's the reason you might find yourself in the same toxic relationships, or self-sabotage your success just when you get close, or wrestle with inner voices that keep telling you you're not enough. The shadow isn't a villain. It's the misunderstood child of your psyche yearning for acknowledgement, healing, and love. It's the voice of past wounds that never got to speak, and the protector that tried to keep you safe through silence and denial. So how do you begin to follow the shadow's way instead of fearing it? First, by noticing your triggers, those sudden waves of anger, shame, or envy that leave you feeling exposed. They are signposts pointing directly to the unhealed shadow parts asking for attention. Second, by inviting curiosity instead of judgment. When you catch yourself resisting or condemning these feelings, pause and ask, what is this trying to show me? Because the answer lies buried in the discomfort. And third, by practicing radical acceptance, welcoming even the darkest emotions without trying to fix, suppress, or run from them, knowing that acceptance is the first step toward transformation. As you walk this path, you begin to see your shadow not as a threat, but as a sacred teacher that reveals the blind spots in your soul's journey, the hidden wounds that, when healed, unlock immense personal power and freedom. The paradox is that the shadow's darkness contains your deepest light. It's the root system of your resilience, creativity, and authenticity, patiently waiting beneath the surface for you to tend to it. When Elijah started to embrace his shadow, he realized that his rage was actually a fierce protector of his boundaries. His jealousy was a clue to his unfulfilled desires, and his shame pointed to the places where he had disconnected from his true worth. This awareness didn't make the feelings vanish overnight, but it dissolved their unconscious control over his life. And here's the truth that your soul wants you to hear right now. Your shadow knows the way because it holds the story of your survival, the blueprint of your pain, and the seed of your rebirth. The darkness is not where you get lost, it's where you find yourself. So instead of fearing what you don't understand in yourself, lean in. Be brave enough to meet your shadow with open eyes and an open heart, because healing isn't about becoming someone new. It's about embracing all of who you already are, including the parts you've tried to hide. The question is no longer if you can trust the light, but if you can trust the darkness to guide you home. Chapter 30. The Soul's GPS. Follow the pull. There's a moment when you feel it, that magnetic tug inside your chest that doesn't come from logic, plans, or anyone else's expectations, but from deep within. Like an ancient compass spinning wildly until it finally locks onto true north. For Marcus, it was a restless afternoon in his small apartment in Seattle, scrolling through endless job listings, feeling numb and stuck, when a sudden impulse to volunteer at a local shelter hit him so strongly he couldn't ignore it. It wasn't part of his carefully laid out career path, nor did it promise immediate rewards. But something about that pull stirred a familiar ache, a silent voice he hadn't dared listen to in years. That pull was his soul's GPS, a guidepost encoded into the fabric of his being, directing him back to himself when life's noise had blurred the way. The soul's GPS doesn't shout or flash neon signs. It speaks softly through gut feelings. Random dreams, meaningful coincidences, or even a sudden fascination with a forgotten passion. It's the subtle yes when your mind says, maybe. The restless energy that propels you toward unknown places despite fear. Following that pull means trusting something unseen and unmeasurable, but deeply true. An inner knowing that knows your soul's history, your wounds, your gifts, and your destiny. It remembers the promises made before birth, the whispers exchanged long before the world told you who to be. And yet, most of us have learned to ignore this GPS. We drown it in busyness, distractions, and the relentless pursuit of what looks good on paper but feels hollow inside. We settle for comfort zones and logical choices that leave our hearts aching in silence. But the soul is patient. It waits for the moments when life's routines break down, when dissatisfaction becomes unbearable, or when joy suddenly flickers at the edges of your awareness. Then it sends signals, sometimes through people, sometimes through signs, sometimes through dreams that invite you to pause and ask, where is this pull taking me? The journey of following the soul's GPS isn't always clear or easy. It often requires stepping into uncertainty, risking judgment, and facing parts of yourself you've hidden away. But every time you say yes to that pull, you are answering a sacred call to live aligned, authentic, and awake. It's a call that reshapes your story from obligation to possibility, from fear to curiosity, from loneliness to connection. Remember, the GPS never leads you astray. Even when the path seems winding or the destination unclear, every step toward that pull brings you closer to your essence, your healing, and your purpose. And sometimes, the destination isn't a place or achievement, it's a new way of being. A deeper presence in your own life. So ask yourself, when was the last time you felt that quiet, undeniable pull? What dreams, people, or moments make your soul stir? And what would happen if you trusted it enough to follow right now, without waiting for permission or perfect timing? Your soul remembers everything, including the path that your heart has always wanted to walk. Will you dare to follow it? Chapter 14. Love isn't lost. It's remembered. In the quiet hours of the night, when the world feels both vast and unbearably empty, Sarah found herself clutching an old photograph, fingers trembling as if holding a fragile flame. It was of her and her first love, a connection so deep and it felt like the very air they breathed together. But years later, after distance, heartbreak, and silence, she wondered, was that love truly gone? Or was it simply buried beneath layers of pain and forgetting? This question cuts to the heart of a truth your soul carries beyond time and circumstance. Love isn't lost, it's remembered. The soul's memory doesn't erase the moments that hurt or the people who left. Instead, it holds on to the essence of love itself, the unbreakable thread that connects you to every tender experience, every raw vulnerability, every fierce promise you ever made or received. We live in a culture that often teaches us love is a finite resource, something to be gained, lost, or traded. But your soul knows differently. It knows love is a frequency of vibration that transcends endings, betrayals, and absence. It is a sacred pulse that weaves through your memories, your dreams, and your silent longings. When you grieve the loss of love, you are not just mourning the person or the moment. You are mourning a part of your own soul's unfolding story. And that mourning is sacred, because in the depths of loss, something else is quietly awakening. The remembrance that love's true power is not possession, but presence. Not attachment, but essence. Love, at its core, is not something to hold tightly or let go of. It is something to carry inside you, always. Like an ember glowing beneath ashes, it can seem extinguished, but with breath and time, it ignites again. This remembering is what allows you to open your heart again without fear, to forgive without forgetting, to embrace vulnerability as strength rather than weakness. It is what teaches you that every heartbreak is a teacher, every goodbye a doorway, and every past love a sacred chapter in your soul's education. When your soul remembers love, it also remembers how to love yourself, the unshakable foundation, from which all other love flows. It recalls the moments when you stood fiercely for your own worth, when you whispered kindness to your broken parts, and when you dared to hope again despite scars. Because love remembered is not sentimental or soft, it is fierce, courageous, and deeply alive. It does not erase the past, but transforms it. So, if you find yourself haunted by love lost or yearning for connection that feels out of reach, know this: your soul is calling you back to love's deeper truth. It asks you to release the story of loss and step into the timeless rhythm where love never truly leaves. It asks you to hold space for the past without letting it define your future. And it asks you one question, one challenge that stirs in the quiet moments when you think no one is watching. Can you remember love well enough to love again? Because the answer will shape not just your relationships, but your entire life. The love your soul remembers is waiting for you to find it, embrace it, and let it guide you home. Chapter 15. You are not broken. For years, Lucas carried the weight of his mistakes like a shroud, convinced that his failures had fractured him beyond repair. He walked through life with a stoic face, hiding a storm inside, convinced that everyone could see the cracks and that those cracks defined him. One night, after a particularly crushing argument with someone he loved, Lucas sat alone in his dark apartment, feeling utterly shattered. But in the quiet, a whisper emerged, a question that felt like a lifeline. What if you're not broken? What if you're just buried? This subtle shift of perception opened a space inside him, a fragile breath of possibility. For too long, society has trained us to believe that being broken means something is permanently damaged, a lost cause to be fixed or discarded. But what if brokenness is really just a surface story, a mask we wear when we're weighed down by layers of unprocessed pain, shame, expectations, and survival tactics? Being buried means something deeper. It means the essential self, the true soul beneath it all, is still alive but hidden, suffocated by years of neglect, harsh judgment, and emotional armor. It means your light hasn't gone out. It's been smothered by the debris of life. The difference between being broken and being buried is radical because it changes the entire journey of healing. Broken implies fracture beyond repair, a puzzle with missing pieces. Buried means whole underneath, waiting patiently for the excavation. Healing, then, isn't about fixing what's shattered, but about gently unearthing the parts of you that have been covered up by fear, trauma, and disconnection. It's about digging through the dirt with care, recognizing that every layer of soil, every painful memory, every self-limiting belief is a piece of your story, but not the sum total of who you are. Like a seed beneath the earth, you might feel dormant, unseen, and powerless. But beneath the surface, life is still stirring. Roots are still growing, and a powerful bloom is inevitable if given space and nourishment. This chapter invites you to see your story not as a collection of broken pieces, but as a rich, fertile ground beneath which your soul is preparing to rise. You are not beyond hope. You are beneath the surface, where true transformation begins. The challenge is learning how to excavate without destroying, how to honor the pain without being consumed by it, and how to trust that what feels buried will emerge in its perfect time. You are not broken. You are buried beneath years of survival. Mechanisms that once saved you, but now limit you. You are buried beneath expectations you never agreed to, and wounds passed down like invisible chains. You are buried beneath silence you held to avoid conflict, beneath grief you buried to keep moving, beneath parts of yourself you hid to be loved. But buried doesn't mean lost. It means waiting. waiting for your courage to become your shovel, your compassion to become your light, and your patience to become your guide. Healing is the sacred art of excavation, the soul's gentle revolution to reclaim what was never truly gone. So ask yourself, what parts of you have I buried out of fear? Which parts am I ready to unearth and let breathe? You are not broken. You are buried, and that buried self remembers everything. It remembers the joy, the strength, the innocence, and the truth that no circumstance could ever erase. The invitation now is to start digging, not to break yourself more, but to find yourself again. Because beneath every layer of pain lies the soul's unshakable essence, patiently waiting to be remembered, reclaimed, and reborn. Chapter 16. The Return of Your Own Voice. For years, Elena spoke in whispers softly, cautiously, afraid her truth might shatter the fragile peace she'd carved out in a world that demanded silence. She learned early that her voice was too loud, too messy, too much, so she tucked it away like a fragile relic, hoping no one would notice it was missing. But silence is not peace. It's a prison. And the soul never forgets the sound it once made. Your voice is not just the sound that escapes your lips. It is the echo of your soul's unique frequency, the pure expression of your story, your pain, your wisdom, your power. When you silence yourself to fit in, to avoid conflict, or to hide wounds, you might survive, but you do not live. You become a ghost inhabiting your own body, a stranger to the essence that made you vibrant and irreplaceable. Yet, the soul is patient. It waits for the moment when the quiet becomes unbearable, when the cost of silence outweighs the comfort of invisibility. That moment arrives in different forms, sometimes as a fiery anger that demands expression, sometimes as a quiet yearning that won't be ignored, sometimes as a burning clarity that tells you, no more. The return of your voice is not an easy journey. It requires unlearning years of conditioning, shedding fears that have nested deep in your psyche, and confronting the parts of yourself you buried to avoid rejection or pain. It means standing in rooms where your words shake the walls and might make others uncomfortable, but where your truth finally finds air to breathe. The voice your soul remembers is raw and authentic, not the polished performance you've rehearsed to please others. It is the voice that laughs without apology, cries without shame, and speaks boldly, even when the world demands silence. 2. Reclaim it. You must listen first. Listen to the thoughts you dismiss, the desires you hide, the truths you deny. Your voice is born from this listening, a conversation with yourself that the world has rarely invited you to have. When you begin to honor your inner dialogue, you build a bridge back to your essence. Your voice becomes a beacon, a magnetic force that draws the right people, opportunities, and experiences into your life because it vibrates with honesty. Remember, your voice is more than words. It's energy, intention, and presence. Speaking your truth awakens not only your soul, but also stirs the collective energy of those who hear you. Your courage gives others permission to do the same. There will be resistance from within and without. Doubts will whisper, "Who do you think you are?" Or "Stay quiet for now." Others might try to silence you, fearing the shift your voice represents. But the soul remembers that silence is a cage. It longs for freedom, for expansion, for resonance. When you reclaim your voice, you reclaim your sovereignty. You tell your story on your terms and refuse to be diminished or erased. You break the chains of invisibility and step into the light of your own existence. So ask yourself, what truths have you been too afraid to speak? What stories have you silenced to keep the peace? What would happen if you let your voice rise imperfect, fierce, and alive? The return of your own voice is not just a personal victory. It is a revolution of the soul. It is the sound of remembering who you truly are and inviting the world to listen. Chapter 17. Time is not linear for the soul. When Maya lost her mother unexpectedly, grief slammed into her like a hurricane, shattering the timeline she thought her life would follow, the timeline of milestones, celebrations, and quiet, ordinary days. But as weeks turned into months, she realized something strange. Her soul was moving on a different clock entirely, one that didn't respect calendars or logic. The ache would flare unpredictably, sometimes triggered by a scent, a song, or a sudden memory, as if her soul was reaching back and forward all at once, refusing to be confined by the linear march of time. This is the paradox the soul lives in. Time as we know it, hours, days, years, is a human construct, a frame designed to order the chaos of experience. Yet the soul remembers and heals outside this frame. It folds past, present, and future into one vast eternal moment where every feeling, lesson, and memory exists simultaneously, waiting patiently for you to catch up. The concept that time heals all wounds is both comforting and misleading, because while the world ticks forward, the soul's healing is not a gradual erasure, but a deep, often jagged excavation of truth that resurfaces when you are ready not. When the clock says you should be. Maybe that's why some losses, betrayals, or heartbreaks feel like they hit you anew decades later, or why a forgotten childhood trauma suddenly floods your consciousness without warning. Your soul is navigating a terrain where time bends, warps, and circles back, where yesterday's pain and tomorrow's hope exist in the same breath. This non-linear reality challenges the cultural push to move on, to neatly package grief or growth into manageable chapters, as if life is a book you can simply close and put on a shelf. But the soul refuses to be rushed, refusing to pretend it's over when it's still working through the layers of remembering and reclaiming that are necessary for true transformation. Healing is not a race. It is a sacred rhythm unique to every soul's journey. When you feel stuck, re-traumatized, or confused by your own emotional cycles, know this. Your soul is not broken or delayed. It is simply working on its own timeless clock, weaving together the threads of your past and future into a tapestry only it can see. In this timeless space, forgiveness may come unexpectedly, clarity dawns after long nights, and your sense of self can expand beyond who you thought you were. You may even glimpse a version of yourself that has already healed, already forgiven, already loved, because in the soul's eternal now, that reality exists even if you cannot yet fully feel it. This understanding invites patience, not the impatience of the mind that demands quick fixes or closure, but a deep, compassionate patience that honors your soul's mysterious unfolding. It's a call to release judgment about where you should be in your journey and instead embrace the divine timing that governs the healing of everything unseen. So when you feel like your progress is invisible or your pain is timeless, remember this. Your soul is moving on its own sacred schedule, a dance beyond clocks and calendars, a dance that invites you to surrender control and trust the process. Time may bend, but your soul's wisdom remains steady, waiting for you to catch up, to remember, and to finally live in the freedom that comes when the past and future collapse into the present moment. The question lingers like a quiet invitation. If time is not linear for your soul, how might your relationship with your pain, your healing, and your life shift when you stop rushing and start listening? Chapter 18. The sacred rage that sets you free. There is a fire inside you that most people are afraid to acknowledge, an ancient, sacred rage that pulses beneath the surface of your calm smile and carefully measured words. Take Marcus, for example, a quiet man from Minneapolis who spent decades burying his anger beneath layers of politeness and keep-it-together resilience until one night Long after everyone else was asleep, the rage boiled over in a torrent of tears, shaking his whole body. For years, he told himself anger was bad, dangerous, destructive, unspiritual. But that night, in the raw silence of his living room, something shifted. Rage wasn't his enemy. Rage was the echo of every time he was silenced, overlooked, or dismissed the voice of his soul demanding justice, truth, and freedom. Sacred rage is not about losing control or harming others. It's the deep power inside you that refuses to accept lies, oppression, or betrayal, whether from yourself, others, or a system designed to keep you small. This kind of rage is the soul's way of remembering what was stolen or denied. It's the force that wakes you from numbness and forces you to reclaim your boundaries and your worth. Because too often, society teaches us to be nice, let it go, or forgive and forget without truly honoring the wound beneath the anger. But sacred rage says, no more pretending, no more silence. It is a refusal to bury your pain to appease others, a fierce refusal to dim your light just to fit in. When you embrace this fire, you tap into the primal energy that fueled every rebel, every prophet, every truth teller who dared to speak when the world demanded silence. Sacred rage is the fuel that breaks chains, tears down walls, and uproots generations of conditioning. It is holy because it honors your full humanity, the joy and the grief, the love and the fury, the vulnerability and the strength. This rage is not about destruction, but about creation, creating space for your authentic self, creating boundaries that protect your spirit, creating a life where your soul can breathe free. But the path is not easy. Sacred rage asks you to feel the fury without shame, to let it rise and fall without judgment, to channel it into transformation rather than chaos. It demands courage to stand in the storm of your own power and not be consumed by it. When you ignore this sacred fire, it doesn't disappear. It festers in your body, mind, and spirit, manifesting as anxiety, depression, or endless frustration. It leaks out in passive aggression or numbness, telling you that something is deeply unresolved. But when you honor the rage, you reclaim energy that's been locked away, energy that can propel you toward healing, justice, and radical self-love. The challenge is learning how to listen to rage's message without letting it control you. What are you angry about? What have you allowed that your soul will no longer accept? What truth have you been afraid to speak aloud? Answering these questions means stepping into your own power and, paradoxically, your own peace. Because sacred rage is not chaos, it is clarity. It is the fire that burns away illusion and reveals your core truth. It connects you to a lineage of warriors and healers who refuse to settle for less than freedom, authenticity, and love. It is the thunder that announces your arrival back to yourself. So don't fear this fire inside you. Don't suppress it or feel guilty for it. Your rage is sacred because it is real. It is the sound of your soul saying, I will not be erased. I will not be small. I will not forget. And when you finally stand in that fire, when you let your rage burn away the old lies, you become unstoppable. You become free. So ask yourself now, what sacred rage is waiting to be honored within you? What freedom is on the other side of that fire? Chapter 19. Becoming who you already are. There is a story whispered among the trees of the ancient forest. A tale of a bird born trapped inside a cage carved of invisible bars made of doubt, fear, and the expectations of others. Yet, bird never truly needed the cage. It was born free, with wings already meant to soar. But for years, it believed the cage was real, building its life around the illusion of confinement, until one day the bird stopped fighting the walls and simply remembered, I am not my cage. Like that bird, You have been living a version of yourself shaped by survival and adaptation, carrying layers of old wounds, societal demands, and the echoes of voices that told you who to be instead of letting you discover who you truly are. Yet beneath all that accumulation, beneath the stories you've told yourself about what is possible or safe, there is a core self unspoiled, authentic, and radiant that has never changed. This chapter isn't about becoming someone new or striving to be more. It is about peeling back every mask, every conditioned belief, every false identity you adopted to belong or to protect yourself, and gently uncovering the essence of your being. It's a return, a homecoming to the original frequency your soul has been humming since the beginning of time. But this return is not passive. It asks for courage, vulnerability, and fierce commitment to truth. Because becoming who you already are means facing the parts you buried in shame or fear, the shadow sides you avoided, and loving them anyway. It means breaking the cycle of self-rejection and replacing it with radical acceptance. You are not broken. You are not incomplete. You are whole. The illusion of separation is what made you believe otherwise. In every moment when you chose self-judgment over self-compassion, you stepped away from this wholeness, but your soul never left it behind. That voice inside, the quiet knowing, the sudden intuition, the inexplicable peace amid chaos, is the signal of that original self calling you back. To truly become who you already are is to learn the art of surrender and fierce presence simultaneously. It is surrendering to what is, without resistance, while remaining fully present to your own power and wisdom. You don't have to chase success, love, or validation outside yourself. They are reflections of your inner alignment with that true self. Imagine the relief of dropping the constant struggle to prove your worth and instead living from a place where worth is inherent, unshakable, and known. This shift transforms everything: your relationships, your work, your health, your joy. It is not about perfection, but authenticity. It is messy, sometimes confusing, and often exhilarating. There will be moments of doubt as old fears resurface to test your resolve, but each time you choose to return to yourself, you grow stronger. You begin to recognize patterns that no longer serve you and gently release them like shedding old skin. You learn to listen deeply to your body, your intuition, your dreams, and trust that they guide you toward your true path. And with each step, the cage dissolves until you see it for what it was: a temporary illusion, a lesson that led you back home. Becoming who you already are is a revolutionary act in a world that profits from your confusion and self-doubt. It is reclaiming your sovereignty, your right to exist fully and freely without apology or compromise. It is the ultimate act of self-love and spiritual awakening. So, ask yourself today, what would it feel like to live as if you were already whole? To trust that every experience, every scar, and every joy was a thread in the tapestry of your becoming? The truth is, the journey isn't to find yourself. It is to remember yourself. Your soul has never forgotten. It patiently waits behind every fear, every story, and every shadow for you to say yes to the magnificent being you were always meant to be. Are you ready to stop searching and start being? Because the only thing standing between you and who you already are is the willingness to remember. Chapter 20. The Soul Remembers. Now, so do you. The moment had finally arrived, not in a blaze of fireworks or thunderous applause, but in the quiet of a late-night room where Emma sat, breathing deeply, eyes closed, hands resting gently on her heart, feeling the steady rhythm beneath her fingertips. For years, Emma had run from her own story, burying memories like shards of glass beneath layers of distraction and denial. She had forgotten who she was before the world told her she wasn't enough, before trauma wrote its dark lines across her spirit, before the relentless noise of should drowned out her own voice. But now, in this sacred silence, the ancient truth that her soul had been whispering all along was rising clear and unshakable. Your soul remembers everything, and now, so do you. This remembering is not a fleeting epiphany or a superficial awakening. It is a profound reckoning with the parts of yourself that have been hidden, feared, or forgotten. It's the long-lost language of your essence, finally decoded by the heart willing to listen. The soul's memory transcends time, space, and circumstance. It holds the blueprint of your true self, your deepest wounds, and your most radiant light. It knows the pain you endured, the battles you fought silently, and the dreams you buried beneath survival. But it also remembers the love that has never left you, the wisdom etched in your bones, and the unbreakable thread of purpose weaving through your existence. To remember your soul is to reclaim your story in its fullest truth, honoring the darkness and the light, the failures and the triumphs, the loss and the endless hope. It is to stand tall in your own skin and say, I am here. I am whole. I am worthy. This journey of remembering has taken you through brokenness and healing, doubt and faith, despair and courage. You've learned that healing is not linear, but a spiral, a dance of falling and rising, forgetting and remembering, losing and finding yourself again. You've come to see that every scar, every tear, every shadow is a sacred marker on the map back to you. Now, the question shifts from why did this happen to me, to what will I do with what I now know? The soul's memory is a call to action, not a call to stay stuck in pain, but a summons to rise from it with fierce compassion and unshakable grace. It asks you to be the guardian of your own light, the keeper of your own truth, the healer of your own wounds. It invites you to live boldly, authentically, and unapologetically, knowing that every step you take forward is a triumph of remembrance over forgetting. This is your reclamation, your revolution, your sacred vow to never again lose sight of who you truly are beneath the masks, the fears, and the conditioning. Because your soul remembers everything, and now so do you. The echoes of your past no longer haunt you. They empower you. The shadows no longer blind you. They illuminate your path. The silence no longer isolates you. It connects you to yourself, to others, and to the infinite mystery of life itself. And as you breathe in this truth, feel the transformation ripple through your being, a peace that surpasses understanding, a strength that defies circumstances, a love that restores and renews. The soul's remembering is the greatest gift you can receive and the most profound journey you can undertake. It is the alchemy of pain into purpose, of loss into legacy, of forgetting into eternal knowing. So rise now, with your heart wide open and your spirit fierce. Step into the life that awaits when you no longer deny your story, but embrace it fully. The soul remembers everything, your courage, your sorrow, your light, and now so do you. What will you choose to remember next?